Cheating wife gets divorced and ghosted after trying to make her affair seem legitimate. As Lisa sat at her kitchen table, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over her notes, she felt a surge of confidence wash over her. She had meticulously planned every word of her speech to Dave, her husband, knowing that this conversation would be pivotal in their relationship. Each point was carefully crafted, designed to resonate with him and to present her case in a way that would appeal to his logical mindset. Lisa understood that Dave thrived on reason and clarity, so she structured her speech like a well-organized argument, complete with supporting evidence and examples that would illustrate her perspective. She wanted to ensure that he would not only hear her but also understand the rationale behind her decisions. Lisa's strategic approach was evident in the way she rehearsed her speech, practicing in front of the mirror until her delivery felt natural. She envisioned the moment they would sit down together, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. She imagined herself speaking with poise, her voice steady as she laid out her thoughts. She had even prepared for potential objections, anticipating Dave's questions and concerns, ready with responses that would address his logical nature. This preparation gave her a sense of control, a feeling that she could steer the conversation in a direction that would lead to his agreement. Yet, beneath this facade of confidence lay a tumultuous sea of emotions. As she practiced, Lisa felt the tight knot of anxiety in her stomach grow tighter. The thought of confronting Dave about her affair was overwhelming, and she grappled with the guilt that threatened to consume her. She knew that her actions had shattered the trust between them, and the weight of that betrayal hung heavily on her shoulders. Each time she rehearsed her speech, she felt a pang of regret, a reminder of the love they once shared and the pain she was about to inflict. The internal conflict was palpable. She wanted to be honest and transparent, yet she feared the repercussions of her honesty. Lisa was acutely aware of the emotional stakes involved. She knew that Dave was not just a logical thinker. He was also a deeply feeling person who had invested years into their marriage. The thought of seeing the hurt in his eyes, the disappointment that would surely follow her revelation, made her heart race. She had always admired Dave's ability to remain calm and rational, but she also understood that this situation would test even his most composed demeanor. The fear of losing him, of watching their life together unravel, was a constant presence in her mind as she prepared for the confrontation. In her heart, Lisa wrestled with the desire for validation that had driven her to seek comfort outside their marriage. She wanted to explain her actions, to make Dave understand the emotional turmoil that had led her to this point. But she also feared that no amount of explanation could justify the pain she had caused. The dichotomy of wanting to be heard while simultaneously fearing the consequences of her words created a whirlwind of emotions that left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. As the hour approached for their conversation, Lisa's confidence began to waver. She questioned whether her carefully crafted speech would be enough to bridge the chasm that had formed between them. Would Dave be able to see beyond her betrayal and understand her struggles, or would he only focus on the hurt she had caused? The uncertainty gnawed at her, and she found herself second-guessing her approach. Each time she rehearsed, she could hear the echoes of doubt creeping in, whispering that perhaps she should have kept her feelings to herself. Despite the turmoil, Lisa knew that she had to confront the truth. She had made a choice, and now it was time to face the consequences. The thought of honesty, while terrifying, also brought a sense of relief. No longer would she have to carry the burden of her secret alone. In that moment of clarity, she realized that this conversation was not just about seeking Dave's agreement. It was also about reclaiming her own voice and taking responsibility for her actions. As she took a deep breath, Lisa steeled herself for the conversation ahead. She reminded herself of the love they had built together, the memories they had shared, and the hope that perhaps, through this painful confrontation, they could find a way to rebuild what had been lost. With her heart racing and her mind racing, she prepared to step into the unknown, ready to face the emotional storm that awaited her. Lisa's affair with John began in the unlikeliest of places, the office. Initially, their relationship was strictly professional, rooted in collaboration on a project that required both of their expertise. Lisa, a dedicated and ambitious employee, found herself working closely with John, a charismatic and confident colleague. Their interactions were marked by a shared passion for their work and as they spent long hours together, a camaraderie developed. They exchanged ideas, challenged each other intellectually, and celebrated small victories as a team. This professional dynamic laid the groundwork for a deeper connection, one that would soon transcend the boundaries of their workplace. As the weeks turned into months, the lines between professional and personal began to blur. Lisa found herself drawn to John's easy laughter and the way he seemed to genuinely appreciate her contributions. He listened intently when she spoke, making her feel valued in a way that she hadn't experienced in a long time. This attention was intoxicating, especially as she began to feel increasingly neglected at home. Dave, her husband, was often preoccupied with work and responsibilities, leaving little room for the emotional intimacy that Lisa craved. The contrast between her home life and the attention she received from John was stark, and it fueled a growing desire for validation that she had long suppressed. The emotional and psychological factors that contributed to Lisa's infidelity were complex and multifaceted. At the core was a profound sense of loneliness that had crept into her marriage. Despite their years together, Lisa felt as though she was living with a roommate rather than a partner. Conversations had dwindled to logistical discussions about bills and schedules, leaving little room for the romantic connection they once shared. Lisa yearned for the emotional support and affection that had initially drawn her to Dave, but as time passed, those needs went unmet. This emotional void left her vulnerable, and when John began to show interest in her as a person, it ignited a spark that she hadn't felt in years. As Lisa and John's relationship deepened, the professional dynamic shifted into something more personal. They began to share snippets of their lives outside of work, stories about their families, their dreams, and their struggles. Lisa found herself confiding in John about her feelings of neglect and isolation, and he listened with empathy, offering her the understanding she craved. This emotional connection became a refuge for Lisa, a place where she could express her frustrations and insecurities without fear of judgment. The more she opened up to John, the more she felt seen and appreciated, further solidifying the bond between them. However, this growing intimacy was not without its complications. Lisa was acutely aware of the boundaries she was crossing, yet the thrill of her connection with John was intoxicating. She rationalized her feelings, convincing herself that it was harmless to seek comfort in someone who understood her struggles. The allure of this new relationship provided a temporary escape from her reality, a distraction from the mounting dissatisfaction she felt at home. Yet, deep down, Lisa grappled with guilt and confusion, torn between her commitment to Dave and the emotional fulfillment she found in John. As their relationship progressed, the emotional stakes escalated. Lisa began to experience a whirlwind of feelings, excitement, guilt, and a sense of liberation. The validation she received from John was a balm for her wounded self-esteem, and she found herself craving more of his attention. Each stolen moment together felt like a secret world where she could be her true self, free from the constraints of her marriage. Yet, with each encounter, the weight of her choices grew heavier. Lisa was aware that she was playing with fire, but the thrill of the affair overshadowed her better judgment. The neglect she felt at home fueled her desire for validation from John, creating a dangerous cycle. As she sought comfort in their relationship, the emotional distance between her and Dave widened. Lisa's feelings of isolation intensified, making her more susceptible to John's charm and understanding. She began to rely on him for emotional support, further entrenching herself in the affair. The more she leaned on John, the more she felt validated, but the more she also risked losing everything she had built with Dave. In reflecting on the origins of her affair, Lisa recognized that it was not merely a moment of weakness, but rather a culmination of unmet needs and emotional turmoil. The gradual shift in her relationship with John was a response to the neglect she felt at home, a misguided attempt to fill the void that had grown in her marriage. As she navigated this complex emotional landscape, Lisa found herself at a crossroads, grappling with the consequences of her choices and the realization that the validation she sought from John came at a steep price. The affair, once a source of excitement, began to reveal itself as a double-edged sword, leaving Lisa to confront the painful reality of her actions and the impact they would have on her life and the lives of those she loved. The pivotal Saturday arrived with an air of anticipation that Lisa couldn't shake off. It was a day like any other, yet it held the potential to change everything. She had agreed to meet John for coffee, a seemingly innocent outing that had become a regular occurrence over the past few months. As they sat across from each other in the bustling cafe, the conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and shared stories. But beneath the surface, an unspoken tension lingered, a magnetic pull that had been building between them. It was during this meeting that John made a suggestion that would irrevocably alter the course of their relationship. He proposed they spend a night together in a hotel room. Lisa's heart raced at the proposition, a mix of excitement and dread flooding her senses. The idea of escaping the confines of her daily life, even for just one night, was intoxicating. She could envision the thrill of being with John, away from the responsibilities of her marriage and the weight of her unfulfilled desires. Yet, as the words hung in the air, a wave of panic washed over her. This was no longer just a flirtation. It was a leap into the unknown, a step that could shatter the fragile foundation of her family life. The gravity of the moment pressed down on her, forcing her to confront the reality of her choices. In that instant, Lisa found herself grappling with an internal conflict that felt insurmountable. On one hand, there was the allure of passion and the validation she had craved for so long. John represented everything that had been missing in her life: excitement, attention, and a sense of being desired. On the other hand, there was her commitment to her family, her husband Dave, and their children. The thought of betraying the man she had built a life with, the father of her children, filled her with guilt and shame. Lisa's mind raced as she weighed her options, torn between the intoxicating pull of her desires and the moral implications of her actions. As she sat across from John, she could see the eagerness in his eyes, the hope that this would be the moment they crossed a line that had been carefully maintained until now. Lisa felt a pang of sadness as she thought about Dave, who had always been her partner and confidant. Their marriage had its flaws, but it was built on years of shared experiences and love. The thought of throwing that away for a fleeting moment of passion felt reckless, yet the temptation was overwhelming. She could feel the walls closing in around her, the weight of her choices pressing down on her chest. Ultimately, Lisa made the decision to accept John's proposal, a choice that would reverberate through her life in ways she could not yet comprehend. The moment she agreed felt like a release, a surrender to the desires that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. Yet, as she left the cafe, a sense of foreboding settled in her stomach. She knew that this decision would not only impact her relationship with John, but would also send shockwaves through her marriage and family dynamics. The consequences of her choice were immediate and profound. That night in the hotel room was everything Lisa had fantasized about: intense, passionate, and liberating. But as the initial thrill faded, reality set in. The guilt began to gnaw at her, a constant reminder of the betrayal she had committed. The next morning, as she returned home to her family, the weight of her actions felt suffocating. She was acutely aware of the facade she had to maintain, the smiles and laughter she had to share with her children, all while carrying the burden of her secret. In the days that followed, Lisa noticed a shift in her family dynamics. The warmth that had once characterized her interactions with Dave began to feel strained. She found herself withdrawing emotionally, unable to connect with him in the same way. The guilt of her infidelity created a chasm between them, one that was difficult to bridge. Dave, sensing the change, became more attentive, trying to understand what was troubling her. But Lisa felt trapped in her own web of lies, unable to confess the truth that lay heavy on her heart. As the weeks passed, Lisa's self-perception began to deteriorate. The validation she had sought from John now felt tainted by guilt and shame. She had crossed a line that she could never uncross, and the weight of that knowledge began to erode her sense of self-worth. The woman who had once felt empowered by her choices now felt like a shadow of her former self, haunted by the consequences of her actions. Each time she looked in the mirror, she was confronted by the reality of her betrayal, a stark reminder of the love she had jeopardized for a fleeting moment of passion. Lisa's internal conflict continued to rage as she navigated the aftermath of her decision. She was caught in a cycle of longing for the excitement John brought into her life while simultaneously mourning the loss of the trust and intimacy she had with Dave. The affair had awakened something within her, a desire for validation and connection that she had long suppressed, but it had also left her feeling more isolated than ever. The impact of her choices rippled through her family, leaving her to grapple with the painful realization that the pursuit of her desires had come at a devastating cost. The atmosphere in the house was thick with tension as Lisa sat on the edge of the couch, her heart pounding in her chest. She could sense that something was off with Dave. His silence was heavy, laden with unspoken words. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the children were out playing with friends, leaving the couple alone in the house. Lisa had hoped for a moment of peace, a chance to breathe and gather her thoughts, but instead, she felt the impending storm brewing. Dave finally broke the silence, his voice low and steady, yet laced with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said, his eyes locking onto hers with a piercing gaze that made her stomach drop. The weight of his words hung in the air, and Lisa felt a wave of panic wash over her. She knew this conversation was coming, but she had hoped to delay it, to find a way to navigate the choppy waters of their relationship without having to confront the truth. But there was no escaping it now. "Is this about work?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as she attempted to deflect. "I've been really busy and I—" "Don't," Dave interrupted, his tone sharp. "This isn't about work. I know about John." The revelation hit Lisa like a punch to the gut. The world around her seemed to blur as she struggled to process his words. How had he found out the thought of her secret being exposed sent her spiraling into a panic? "Dave, I can explain," she stammered, her mind racing as she searched for the right words. "It's not what you think. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then what was it?" he demanded, his voice rising with frustration. "What was it?" "Lisa, you had an affair. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family." Each accusation felt like a dagger, piercing through the fragile facade she had tried to maintain. Lisa's heart raced as she grappled with the reality of her actions, the weight of her guilt crashing down on her like a tidal wave. "I was lonely," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been so distant, and I felt like I was losing you. I didn't know how to reach you." The words spilled out in a rush, a desperate attempt to justify her behavior. She could see the hurt in Dave's eyes, the disbelief mingling with anger, and it made her heart ache. "Lonely," he echoed, incredulous. "So you thought sleeping with someone else was the answer? You thought that would fix things?" His voice trembled with emotion, and Lisa could see the pain etched across his face. It was a look she had never wanted to see, a look that made her feel small and ashamed. "I thought it would help me feel alive again," she replied, her voice cracking. "I thought maybe I could find some validation, some connection that I felt was missing. I didn't mean to hurt you, Dave. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "You shattered the trust we built over years. You made a choice, Lisa. You chose him over us." The finality of his words hung in the air, and Lisa felt her heart sink. She had known this moment would come, but the reality of it was far more devastating than she had anticipated. As the conversation unfolded, Lisa's panic intensified. She could see the walls of their marriage crumbling around them, and the weight of her choices felt unbearable. "I'm sorry," she pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't affect us." "Handle it," Dave scoffed, his voice laced with bitterness. "You think you can just handle infidelity? You think you can compartmentalize your feelings and pretend it doesn't matter? It matters, Lisa. It matters to me, to our children. You've put everything we've built at risk." The emotional weight of the conversation pressed down on Lisa, and she felt as though she were suffocating. She had wanted to be honest, to confront her feelings, but now that the truth was out, she was overwhelmed by the consequences. "I didn't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought I could find a way to feel whole again." "But you didn't," Dave replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "You chose to betray me instead. You chose to seek comfort in someone else rather than talk to me about what you were feeling." The disappointment in his voice cut deeper than any accusation. It was a reminder of the love they had once shared, now overshadowed by betrayal. As the confrontation continued, Lisa felt the ground beneath her feet shifting. This was not just a conversation. It was the unraveling of their marriage. The realization hit her like a freight train. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The love they had built, the trust they had nurtured, was now hanging by a thread, and she was terrified of what lay ahead. In that moment, Lisa understood the significance of this confrontation. It was a turning point, a moment that would define the trajectory of their lives. The emotional fallout would ripple through their family, affecting not just their relationship but also their children. The weight of her choices settled heavily on her shoulders, and she felt the enormity of the situation crashing down around her. As the conversation drew to a close, Lisa realized that there was no easy way out. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and the road to healing would be long and painful. She had to confront the reality of her actions and the impact they had on the people she loved most. In that moment of raw honesty, Lisa understood that the confrontation with Dave was not just about her infidelity. It was about the unraveling of everything she had once held dear. After the intense confrontation with Dave, Lisa felt as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath her. The weight of their argument hung heavily in the air, and as Dave stormed out of the house, she was left in a state of frantic disbelief. Panic surged through her veins as she realized that she didn't know where he had gone. The reality of her actions began to sink in, and with it came a wave of fear that gripped her heart. What if he didn't come back? What if he needed help, and she wasn't there for him? The thought of something happening to him sent her into a spiral of anxiety. Lisa rushed to grab her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed his number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Dave, please pick up," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Just come home." Each unanswered call deepened her sense of dread, and she felt a growing urgency to find him. She threw on a jacket and stepped outside, her mind racing with possibilities. Where could he be? The local bar, a friend's house. The thought of him drowning his sorrows in alcohol made her stomach churn. As she drove through the familiar streets, Lisa's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt washed over her in waves, crashing against the walls she had built to protect herself. She had betrayed the man she loved, the father of her children, and now she was left to grapple with the consequences. The gravity of her actions loomed large, and she felt as though she were suffocating under the weight of her choices. Every moment spent searching for Dave was a reminder of the trust she had shattered, and the fear of losing him felt like a knife twisting in her gut. The emotional turmoil was relentless. Lisa recalled the look of hurt and betrayal in Dave's eyes, a sight that would haunt her for days to come. She had never wanted to hurt him. She had only sought validation and connection in a moment of weakness. But now, as she drove aimlessly, she realized that her actions had far-reaching consequences that extended beyond their marriage. The thought of their children, blissfully unaware of the turmoil unfolding between their parents, filled her with a sense of dread. How would they cope with the fallout? Would they blame her? Would they even understand? As Lisa continued her search, she couldn't shake the image of her children's innocent faces from her mind. They had always been her priority, and the thought of them being affected by her choices was unbearable. She imagined them coming home to find their father missing, the confusion and fear that would surely follow. The idea of their family being torn apart was a nightmare she couldn't bear to face. She had always wanted to create a loving and stable environment for them, and now she felt as though she was on the brink of destroying everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lisa spotted Dave's car parked outside a small bar on the edge of town. Her heart raced as she pulled into the lot, her palms sweaty on the steering wheel. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. As she stepped out of the car, the cool evening air hit her like a slap, grounding her in the reality of the situation. She approached the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest, and pushed the door open. Inside, the dim lighting cast shadows across the room, and she quickly spotted Dave sitting at the bar, a glass of whiskey in front of him. He looked disheveled, his eyes distant and lost. The sight of him sent a fresh wave of guilt crashing over her. "Dave," she called softly, her voice trembling as she approached him. He turned to look at her, and for a moment, the world around them faded away. but the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable, and it pierced through her like a dagger. "What are you doing here, Lisa?" he asked, his voice low and strained. There was a mixture of anger and sadness in his tone, and it broke her heart. "I thought you needed space." "I do, but I can't just leave things like this," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost, and I made a terrible mistake." Dave's silence was deafening, and Lisa felt the weight of his disappointment pressing down on her. She could see the internal struggle etched on his face, the battle between love and betrayal playing out in real time. "You don't understand the gravity of what you've done," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've broken my trust, Lisa. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." The words hit her like a physical blow, and she felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I want to fix this. I want to fight for us." As they stood there, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The confrontation had not only exposed the cracks in their marriage, but had also set off a chain reaction that would impact their entire family. The children, who had always seen their parents as a united front, would now have to navigate the fallout of their choices. Lisa could already envision the confusion in their eyes, the questions they would ask, and the fear that would settle in their hearts. The emotional toll of the confrontation was palpable, and Lisa realized that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. They would have to confront the truth of their situation, face the pain of betrayal, and decide whether they could rebuild what had been broken. The impact of her actions would ripple through their family dynamics, and the thought of her children suffering because of her choices filled her with a profound sense of regret. As Lisa and Dave stood at the bar, the weight of their confrontation hung heavily between them. The immediate consequences of their argument were clear. Their marriage was at a crossroads, and the path forward was uncertain. Lisa felt the gravity of her actions pressing down on her, and she knew that the journey to healing would be long and arduous. But in that moment, she also felt a flicker of hope, a desire to fight for her family, to confront the pain, and to seek redemption for the love they had once shared. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets, Lisa felt a growing sense of urgency and despair. After the confrontation with Dave, she was left reeling, her heart heavy with guilt and fear. She had never intended for things to escalate to this point, and now, with Dave missing, the weight of her actions felt unbearable. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her contacts, desperately searching for someone who might know where he was. "Come on, pick up," she muttered under her breath, dialing the number of one of Dave's close friends, hoping he might have seen him. The phone rang and rang, but there was no answer. Panic surged within her, and she quickly moved on to the next name on her list. Each unanswered call felt like a dagger to her heart, a reminder of the chasm that had opened between them. She could feel her chest tightening as she imagined the worst. What if he was hurt? What if he was alone and scared? With each passing minute, her anxiety escalated. She decided to drive to the bar where she had last seen him, her heart racing as she navigated the familiar streets. The world outside felt surreal, as if she were moving through a fog. The laughter of children playing in the park nearby only deepened her sense of isolation. She had once been a part of that world, a loving wife and mother, but now she felt like an outsider, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. Arriving at the bar, Lisa parked her car and rushed inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The dim lighting and the smell of alcohol hit her like a wave, but she pushed through, scanning the room for any sign of Dave. She approached the bartender, her voice shaky as she asked, "Have you seen my husband? He was here earlier." The bartender shook his head, and Lisa felt her heart sink further. "He left a while ago," he said, his tone indifferent. "Do you know where he went?" she pressed, desperation creeping into her voice. But the bartender shrugged, and Lisa felt a wave of despair wash over her. She turned to leave, her mind racing with possibilities. Where could he be? She thought of all the places he might go to escape the pain, and her heart ached at the thought of him feeling lost and alone. As she drove through the streets, Lisa's thoughts spiraled into a dark abyss. She couldn't shake the guilt that clung to her like a shadow. The weight of her infidelity pressed down on her, suffocating her with regret. She had betrayed the man who had stood by her side through thick and thin, and now she was left to grapple with the consequences of her choices. What if he never forgave her? What if this was the end of their marriage? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic coursing through her veins. She decided to visit a few of Dave's favorite spots, places where he often found solace. First, she drove to the local coffee shop, hoping he might be there, nursing a drink and contemplating their situation. As she entered, the familiar scent of coffee filled her senses, but her heart sank when she didn't see him. She approached the barista, her voice trembling as she asked, "Have you seen Dave?" The barista shook her head, and Lisa felt her heart drop. Next, she drove to the park where they often took their children. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the playground, but the sight only deepened her sense of loss. She walked through the park, her eyes scanning the benches and pathways, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Each empty space felt like a reminder of the love they had shared, now overshadowed by betrayal. She sat on a bench, her head in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks as she contemplated the potential consequences of her actions. What if their children came home to find their father gone? What would they think? The thought of their innocent faces filled with confusion and hurt was unbearable. Lisa felt a wave of nausea wash over her as she imagined the fallout of her choices. She had wanted to feel alive again, to seek validation outside her marriage, but now she was faced with the reality that her actions could tear their family apart. The emotional toll of the situation weighed heavily on her, and she felt as though she were drowning in a sea of despair. Each moment spent searching for Dave was a reminder of the love they had built, now hanging by a thread. She had taken a gamble, and now she was paying the price. The guilt gnawed at her insides, a constant reminder of the pain she had caused. As darkness fell, Lisa returned to her car, feeling more lost than ever. She had searched everywhere, but there was still no sign of Dave. The fear of losing him consumed her, and she felt a sense of hopelessness creeping in. She had never imagined that her choices could lead to such devastation, and now she was left to confront the reality of her actions. With tears streaming down her face, Lisa picked up her phone once more, her heart racing as she dialed Dave's number again. "Please, just pick up," she whispered, her voice breaking. But once again, it went to voicemail. "I'm so sorry, Dave. I need you to come home. I love you." The words felt hollow, but they were all she had left. As she sat in her car, the weight of her choices pressing down on her, Lisa realized that she had to confront the truth. She had to face the consequences of her actions, not just for herself, but for her family. The search for Dave was not just about finding him. It was about finding a way back to the love they had once shared. But as the night deepened, she felt the darkness closing in, and the fear of what lay ahead threatened to consume her whole. As the crisis unfolded, Lisa found herself increasingly isolated from her family, who were grappling with their own feelings of disappointment and concern regarding her actions. The news of her infidelity had spread like wildfire, and the reactions from her parents were swift and severe. They had always held strong values about marriage and commitment, and Lisa's betrayal shattered their perception of her as a devoted wife and mother. When Lisa finally mustered the courage to face her parents, she was met with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Her mother, usually a source of comfort, looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. "How could you do this, Lisa?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You've always been the one who believed in love and family. What were you thinking?" The weight of her mother's words struck Lisa like a physical blow, and she felt her heart sink. She had hoped for understanding, but instead, she was met with judgment. Her father, usually stoic and reserved, was equally dismayed. "You've put your family at risk," he said, his voice low and filled with disappointment. "What about your children? What kind of example are you setting for them?" Each accusation felt like a dagger, piercing through the fragile remnants of her self-esteem. Lisa had always sought her parents' approval, and now, standing before them, she felt like a failure. The disappointment in their eyes was a reflection of her own guilt, and it deepened her sense of isolation. As the days passed, the tension between Lisa and her family grew palpable. They rallied around Dave, offering him support and understanding, while Lisa felt increasingly pushed to the margins. Her parents reached out to him, expressing their concern for his well-being and offering their assistance in any way they could. Lisa watched as they embraced him, offering comfort and reassurance, while she stood on the sidelines, feeling like a pariah in her own family. The very people who had once been her greatest allies now seemed to view her as the enemy, and the emotional toll was overwhelming. The conversations at family gatherings became strained and awkward. Lisa's parents would speak about Dave with admiration, praising his strength and resilience in the face of adversity. "He's such a good man," her mother would say, her voice filled with warmth. "He deserves so much better than this." Each compliment directed at Dave felt like a knife twisting in Lisa's heart. She wanted to defend herself, to explain the complexities of her feelings and the circumstances that had led to her choices, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she remained silent, feeling the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. As the emotional isolation deepened, Lisa found herself grappling with the fallout of her choices in solitude. She had always been close to her family, sharing her joys and sorrows with them, but now she felt like a stranger in her own life. The support that had once been a source of strength now felt like a reminder of her failures. She longed for understanding, for someone to see beyond her mistakes and recognize the pain she was experiencing. But instead, she was met with a wall of disappointment that left her feeling utterly alone. The isolation was suffocating. Lisa would sit in her room, staring at the walls, replaying the events that had led to her infidelity over and over in her mind. She felt trapped in a cycle of guilt and regret, unable to escape the consequences of her actions. The emotional burden was heavy, and she struggled to find a way to express her feelings to anyone. Each time she attempted to reach out to her parents, she was met with their disappointment, and it only deepened her sense of despair. Even her friends, who had once been a source of comfort, seemed to take sides. Many of them reached out to Dave, offering their support and understanding, while Lisa felt increasingly alienated. She had hoped for a sympathetic ear, someone who could help her navigate the storm, but instead, she found herself facing the fallout alone. The loneliness was crushing, and she felt as though she were drowning in her own choices. As the days turned into weeks, Lisa's emotional state deteriorated. The isolation she felt was compounded by the knowledge that her family had chosen to side with Dave. She understood their perspective. After all, she had betrayed the man they had come to love and respect. But the realization that she had lost not only her husband, but also her family's support was a bitter pill to swallow. She felt like a ghost in her own life, haunting the spaces where love and connection had once thrived. In the quiet moments, when she was left alone with her thoughts, Lisa grappled with the enormity of her situation. She had made choices that had irrevocably altered the course of her life, and now she was left to confront the consequences. The emotional isolation was suffocating, and she longed for a way to bridge the gap between herself and her family. But with each passing day, it felt as though that gap widened, leaving her stranded in a sea of regret and sorrow. Ultimately, Lisa realized that she had to confront her family, to express the pain she felt and the remorse that weighed heavily on her heart. But the fear of their judgment held her back, and she remained trapped in her isolation, grappling with the fallout of her choices alone. The crisis had not only strained her marriage but had also fractured the bonds with her family, leaving her to navigate the tumultuous waters of guilt and regret without the support she so desperately needed. As the dust began to settle from the emotional turmoil of Lisa's infidelity, the legal consequences of her actions loomed large, casting a long shadow over her future. The decision to pursue a divorce was not taken lightly, but it was a necessary step for both Lisa and Dave as they navigated the fallout of their shattered marriage. The custody battle that ensued became a battleground for their conflicting emotions, with both parents vying for the love and stability of their children. The court proceedings were fraught with tension, and Lisa felt the weight of her choices bearing down on her as she entered the courtroom. She had hoped for a fair chance to present her case, to demonstrate her commitment to her children despite the mistakes she had made. However, the reality of the situation was stark. Dave had established a stable environment for their children, one that was rooted in routine and security. He had always been the more grounded parent, and the court recognized this as a significant factor in their decision-making process. As the judge listened to testimonies from both sides, It became clear that Dave's strong bond with the children played a pivotal role in the court's ruling. He had been the primary caregiver during the tumultuous period following Lisa's affair, stepping up to provide emotional support and stability when the children needed it most. The court noted his dedication to their well-being, highlighting his involvement in their daily lives, from attending school events to managing their extracurricular activities. In contrast, Lisa's emotional turmoil and the chaos surrounding her actions painted a less favorable picture. The ruling came down with a heavy thud, favoring Dave in the custody arrangement. Lisa felt as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath her. The judge awarded him primary custody, granting Lisa visitation rights but emphasizing the need for a stable environment for the children. The decision felt like a crushing blow, a stark reminder of the consequences of her choices. She had hoped to maintain a significant role in her children's lives, but now she faced the reality of being a part-time mother, a visitor in the lives of the very children she had fought so hard to protect. The emotional stakes involved in the custody battle were immense for both Lisa and Dave. For Lisa, the ruling felt like a loss of identity. She had always seen herself as a devoted mother, and now she was faced with the prospect of being relegated to a secondary role. The thought of not being there for her children during their milestones, their struggles, and their everyday lives filled her with despair. She worried about how the ruling would affect her relationship with them, fearing that they would see her as the parent who had let them down. The guilt of her actions weighed heavily on her heart, and she grappled with the fear that her children would resent her for the choices she had made. For Dave, the ruling was a bittersweet victory. While he felt a sense of relief in knowing that he could provide a stable environment for their children, he also understood the emotional toll it took on Lisa. He had loved her once, and despite the pain she had caused, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for her plight. The custody battle had forced them into adversarial roles, but deep down, he knew that they were both suffering from the fallout of their broken marriage. He wanted to protect their children, but he also wished for a way to heal the wounds that had been inflicted on their family. The implications of the court's ruling extended far beyond the immediate custody arrangement. For Lisa, it meant a future filled with uncertainty. She would have to navigate the complexities of co-parenting with Dave, all while grappling with her own feelings of inadequacy and guilt. The limited time she would have with her children felt like a constant reminder of her failures, and she feared that the bond they once shared would be irrevocably altered. Each visit would be tinged with the knowledge that she was no longer the primary influence in their lives, and the thought of missing out on their growth and development was a heavy burden to bear. Moreover, the ruling impacted her sense of self-worth. Lisa had always defined herself through her role as a mother, and now she felt stripped of that identity. The emotional isolation she had experienced during the custody battle only deepened as she faced the reality of her situation. Friends and family had rallied around Dave, offering him support and understanding, while Lisa felt increasingly alone in her struggle. The judgment she faced from those around her compounded her feelings of inadequacy, and she found herself questioning whether she would ever be able to rebuild her life. As the weeks turned into months, Lisa began to adjust to her new reality. She focused on making the most of her visitation time, determined to create meaningful moments with her children despite the limitations imposed by the court. Each visit was a bittersweet reminder of what she had lost, but she poured her heart into those moments, hoping to reinforce the bond they shared. She wanted them to know that she loved them unconditionally, even if her presence in their lives was no longer what it once had been. In the end, the custody battle served as a harsh lesson for Lisa, a reminder of the fragility of relationships and the far-reaching consequences of her actions. The ruling had altered the course of her life, but it also ignited a desire within her to become a better person, a better mother. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to fight for her relationship with her children, to prove to them that she was still their mother, despite the mistakes she had made. The journey toward healing and redemption would be long, but Lisa was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. In this video, we have explored the emotional journey of Lisa, a woman whose choices led her down a tumultuous path of infidelity and heartache. From the initial thrill of her affair with John to the devastating confrontation with her husband, Dave, Lisa's story serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of love, trust, and the consequences of our actions. We have witnessed how her decisions not only impacted her marriage but also reverberated through her family, leading to a painful custody battle that altered the dynamics of her relationships with her children and her own sense of self-worth. Throughout the video, we have highlighted the emotional turmoil Lisa experienced as she grappled with feelings of guilt, regret, and isolation. Her journey underscores the importance of communication in relationships, as the lack of open dialogue between Lisa and Dave created a chasm that ultimately led to betrayal. The fallout from her choices serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that fidelity is not just a commitment but a cornerstone of trust that holds relationships together. Lisa's story illustrates how quickly things can unravel when we fail to address our emotional needs and communicate openly with our partners. As we reflect on Lisa's journey, we encourage viewers to consider the significance of maintaining strong lines of communication in their own relationships. It is essential to express feelings, address concerns, and seek validation from our partners rather than looking outside the relationship for fulfillment. The emotional stakes are high, and the consequences of neglecting these vital aspects can be devastating, as Lisa's experience has shown. We invite you to engage with this content further by subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing it with others who may benefit from Lisa's story. By spreading awareness about the importance of communication and fidelity, we can foster healthier relationships and encourage open dialogues about emotional needs. Additionally, be sure to explore related content on our channel, where we delve into various topics surrounding love, trust, and the complexities of human relationships. Your support helps us continue to create meaningful content that resonates with viewers and promotes understanding in the realm of personal connections. In conclusion, Lisa's journey is a powerful reminder of the emotional weight of our choices and the far-reaching consequences they can have on our loved ones. As we navigate our own relationships, let us strive to prioritize communication, nurture trust, and remain committed to the bonds we hold dear. Thank you for watching, and we hope you join us for more discussions that inspire reflection and growth in our relationships.